Hey everybody, how are you guys doing? It is a wonderful Sunday. In some places it's cold, in some places it's snowing, and most places though it's actually cold. So when you get on this live, do what I always want y'all to do. I want you to check in. Let me know where you're checking in from. Give me your city, your state, if you're in a different country. But today we're going to talk about New Orleans. So many of you know because you've been following my IG page, passports underscore plates. Make sure you're following it. You've been following my IG page, and since I've been here, I've been on a oyster tour. Now, I haven't been able to get the oysters like I've been wanting to because a lot of places just don't have them, but New Orleans has tons of it. So I decided to come out here to do a little oysters tour, and I came out and met up with one of my frat brothers who took me to a new place. So I want to go ahead and just break down some of the places that I've been. Now, first off, New Orleans is cold. It was actually colder than what it was supposed to be because I checked the weather before I left, and it was supposed to be 50s, mid 50s, and it's been 30s and 40s this whole time. Right now, it's kind of overcast and threatening to rain. So I'm kind of staying inside, taking care of some work. So when I came here, of course, you know, everywhere you got to go is Acme Oyster House. You always hear about going to Acme Oyster House as one of the top places to go. I always do go to Acme, and Acme is actually Acme, Felix's, and Bourbon House are all right there next to each other. So now when I went to Acme, I went ahead and got the Charboard Oysters. New Orleans was actually the first place I've ever had Charboard Oysters at. And my first time having them was actually at Felix's. But I went to Alex's and we had Charboard Oysters. I had a small bowl of the Gumbo. And I also had some ice cream, and I put a Bailey shot on top of it just to give it a little bit of a kick. Now, even though I love going to Acme's Oyster House for various other things, last time we went, my frat had the etouffee and he loved it. The oysters I always find when it comes to the charbroil, they always seem to be a little bit salty to me. I don't know if it's just me because when I said it to my friend about it, he didn't seem to notice that they were salty or anything, but maybe it was just me. But what I do love about them is I do love the fact that they give you a lot of the butter sauce in the plate so you can take your bread and dip it in the butter and sop up all those sauces. I do like the fact that when they're come, that they are char-broiled, but they're not overcooked. They're not burnt or anything like that. So they went in there just enough time. Now, I had the gumbo. The gumbo was pretty good. For me, it wasn't spicy enough. I prefer for my gumbo and such to be a little bit spicier than what they gave. And in my opinion, I think that they could have had a little bit more of the seafood in there, or more chunks of the sausage, okra, or something like that. But overall, it was pretty good. Now, my time there was fun, though. It was very entertaining. I sat at the bar. They are limiting seats, you know, so they are keeping people a distance away. You have to wear a mask anytime you walk in or get to go anywhere. All of the employees are wearing masks. And what they do at every restaurant you go to in New Orleans, they are required to go ahead and get your name and get your phone number just in case there is an outbreak. They have everyone's name and number who's been in the restaurant so they can go ahead and call you to let you know. So I did like that for all the restaurants. So I did Acme on my first day here. Now, my friend wasn't very excited about that because he couldn't come. So when we met up on Saturday, we did a whole bar hopping tour. So we started at Bourbon House. Now, I've walked by Bourbon House several times on my visits down here and never really realized that it was an oyster bar. Granted, almost every restaurant here serves oyster, but not every restaurant serves oysters. So he told me about it, which prompted my visit to come down, and basically we went in there. Now, it is a full-fledged bourbon house. It took like a couple of seconds. I was like, wow, there's a lot of bourbon. It's a lot of bourbon. It's a lot of bourbon. Then I was like, oh, yeah, T-shirt. It's Bourbon House. So they have tons of different bourbons. And there's a picture that I took on my IG that shows a list of all the bourbons you can get inside of that restaurant. And there's a lot of bourbon. So that's what they're well known for. The place is huge. It is a 2-level restaurant. They are social distancing. And even though they are mostly just seating people in the front, if there's a lot of people coming in, they will move you to the back. So when we got there, luckily, we was able to get there during happy hour. Now, during the happy hour time, that means that all our oysters, our raw oysters anyway, were $1 a piece. So we ended up getting a dozen raw and a dozen of the char-broiled oysters. Now, I have to say, those oysters, people, those oysters tasted like they just came out the sea. Like we tasted the sea in those raw oysters. They were amazing. They were meaty and they were seafoody. They were salty and sweet. It was just like they just came out the water and they maybe dipped it back into the ocean before they gave it to us. The Charboard Oysters came out looking really fancy because Bourbon House is more of an upscale looking type place, you know, so they had the little platter and everything. So their Charboard Oysters was better than Acme's in my opinion, but they didn't give me as much of the butter and the juices that come from when you charbroil the oysters and go ahead and with the butter and everything. But they give you a whole loaf of bread with some whipped butter. Not that we touch the butter to dip the sauces. I did show my friend. I said, this is how you do it. You go ahead and you take the oyster, take the bread, and you drip all the drippings on the bread. Then you eat the bread. So he's like, oh, never knew that. So he just actually got into eating raw oysters. So he showed me how he was taught by one of our other stars how to eat his raw oysters. How do you eat your oysters? So this is what he does. He takes the oyster. He puts some of the cocktail sauce. He puts salt on it. He puts horseradish, a couple of dollops of hot sauce. To me, perfect thing. I think once you put horseradish, you don't need hot sauce. And that's how he eats it. And that's how he loves it. So we went through and we ate all of those oysters and we had our first Sazerac of the night. Now, if you don't know what a Sazerac is, the original drink of New Orleans. And I actually did get a chance to go to the Sazerac store. I got one of my bags right here. They have a Sazerac house. And inside of there, you can actually get drinks and seasonings and sugars and so much more and get the history of the drink. So we had that. We had fun. We watched the game while this was going on. So next we got up and walked right across the way to Felix's. So we went to Felix, and Felix has more of a cafeteria, relaxed atmosphere inside of their restaurant. You know, so it's a lot more casual. So we went in there. We already knew we was getting charbroiled and we was going to get raw oysters, but they have a list. They also have the Oyster Du Jour, which is the oyster of the day. They have Oysters Rockefeller. They had another oyster, but it wasn't available at that time. So they had like 5 different oysters. So of the 5, I believe we ordered like 4 different types of oyster. I think we ordered everything but the one that wasn't available. So the first one we got was the raw oysters. Now, the raw oysters were definitely bigger and meatier than what we just saw at Bourbon House. They were definitely bigger and meatier, and they were still good, but they didn't have that fresh out of water. They weren't as, I think these were a little bit more of the salty type of oysters, whereas Bourbon House was using more of the sweeter oysters. As you may not know, oysters come definitely in different flavors, depending on what type of water they was grown in, the type of oyster, and so much more. So the ones at Acme was a little bit more of a salty version maybe, and the ones at the one at Bourbon House was more of the sweeter, and whereas one at Felix's was more of the salty, but it was still really good, giant size, good size oysters to eat. Then we went ahead and got the Oysters Rockefeller, which has spinach, Parmesan, and a little bit of a cream sauce, and they cook it. Now, it was okay. I mean, we had to be honest with the people. The oysters was okay for the Rockefeller. It really tasted like the spinach was a little bit burnt, so we didn't even finish. We ordered 6 and only ate maybe 2 or 3, and we was like, yeah, we didn't really like this one at all, so we gave it back. One of the things that Felix does is tableside cocktail sauce. They make your cocktail sauce for you, just like you can get guacamole made. They make it for you on the spot. They put everything in the bowl, and then they let you mix it up. Now, we made it spicy, which basically meant we put in extra horseradish. And let's just say during that day, our sinuses was cleared all day after that. So we had that, and that was actually amazing. I had never seen cocktail sauce made the way they made it, with the ketchup, the Worcestershire, a squinch of lemon, and the horseradish, and a little bit of salt was added, and that was it. And it was amazing. It was like the best cocktail sauce I've ever had. We also got the Oyster Du Jour, which was basically fried oyster with this like mushroom sauce on it. It was actually really good. It was like eating oyster popcorn. Like, you know, you have popcorn chicken. This is like popcorn oysters. Those have been really great for like snacks or a football game or something like that, just to pop in your mouth and to keep going. Then we also got the Char-Broiled Oysters. Now, they were good. Don't get me wrong. They had the butter. They gave you the big bread. They put the sauce and everything all over the bread. It was really good. But they were a little bit overcooked. The shell was really, really burnt on the bottom. And I think that was kind of the thing with all of their cooked food. It was a little bit burnt. So maybe the fire was either too hot or they didn't take it out fast enough. I don't know. But overall, it was good. The only thing that we didn't care for was their version of the Rockefeller. It really wasn't that good. So there we only drank water. And then after we left, we took a detour, went to the Sazerac place. After we left the Sazerac, got our bottles. He got himself, I believe, he didn't get the Manhattan. He got, it's like 2 different versions where the drink is already mixed for you. I forget which one he got, but he got the Manhattan. I got a shot glass. I got some bourbon sugar. I got them. I got a magnet from my mom, and then I got some bitters in here. So after that, we went and walked over to Drago's. Now, Drago's is not in the French Quarter area at all, which is probably I've never gone because I didn't know where it was. Drago's is all the way at the Hilton Riverside. So we walked all the way down there. And now, even though the website does say it's closed, the bar is actually open. So you can come to the bar and order food. So when we got there, this is where we had the char-broiled oysters. That's the only type of oysters they do. They don't do raw oysters. They do char-broiled oysters, some bar foods, and tons of drink. I had this coconut ginger lemonade. Let's just say that lemonade is really an adult lemonade. It's a strong drink, but it's not like taste strong. It's, you know, it's good, but it's strong. So we had the Charboard Oysters. Now, this is the one that he was raving about. Like when we were talking about that bourbon house, and he was like, "You still haven't had it?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." When he called, his face lit up like a little kid when he found out that we could actually go and sit and get oysters. So when they came out, now these oysters were pretty. Now they are charbroiled because we could see where the guy was cooking it. But when they came out, they were not black and crispy like some places are. And that the top of it wasn't really burnt-ish or looking or crusty or nothing. You know what I mean? So when I took my first bite, I was amazed. That was the best charbroiled oyster I've ever had. It basically melted in your mouth. It literally tasted like, and it looked like they charbroiled it, and then they added the Parmesan thing on top and just let it melt while the oysters were still piping hot. That's honestly what it looked like. And it didn't taste overcooked. I've had charbroiled oysters in various different places where the oyster was cooked and it was overcooked, so it was kind of chewy. The best charbroiled oyster I feel is one where the top is charbroiled, but the oyster itself is not completely cooked. It still has some of the softness to it. That was the best. We ordered 24 of them. We had one round of 12, and then his friend showed up, so we ordered another round of 24, and we knocked it out of the park. That was some of the best oysters I've ever had. They melted in your mouth. They were very light, if you could say fluffy. Some of the best oysters. Now, of course, this is not the only places in New Orleans to get oysters. There are tons and tons of places. So I would love in the comments below, tell me some of your favorite places in the New Orleans area to go ahead and get oysters. Now, of course, that ended our tour. We sat at this last location for at least 2 hours, just talking, having fun, drinking, and eating oysters. But we had a great time, and I'm really glad that I came down here and I did that. Now, of course, that wasn't the only reason I came down. I did visit a couple other places, you know, and I've been doing some work with the business. But you know, I just needed to get away real quick, work on some things, come see some people, and get my oysters since Texas still doesn't have oysters like I wanted. But all in all, I had a great time. Ate a lot of oysters. I think I want to say I ate maybe almost 3 dozen oysters yesterday. It felt great, you know. But yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this review. Hopefully you'll comment below and let me know where you're watching from, where your favorite place to get oysters, your favorite type of oyster, where's a good place to get oysters, where you're from, and so much more. But I look forward to seeing your comments. And as always, travel safe. Stay safe, travel often, and eat well. I'm going to talk to you guys later. Bye.